Okay, so a Siman Lamed Beis Halach Chaf Aleph. Okay, so we're still going through the halachas of writing the klaf on the tefillin. So says the Mechaber in Siman Chaf Aleph, Kol Parsha Acha Sheyichtevena Yikre'ena Hetiv. After the Sofer has written the parsha of the tefillin, he should read it very carefully, bekavona, v'dikduk, pamayim v'shalosh, 2 or 3 times, to make sure that it's all correct, there are no mistakes. V'yachzar v'yikre'ena koidem sheyitnena b'teich beisa, and he should read it again before he puts it into the bias. Kadei shelo tischalef parsha b'parsha. Make sure that he should put the right parsha. He should put the right parsha into the right box, into the right compartment. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chaf Aleph, Yikre'ena heitev. He should read it carefully. Because if he finds there's a letter missing in one of the parshas, lo hi levada nifsala ele kol mashacharehem. Whatever is written afterwards, you've got one letter missing, so all the rest of it can all be perfectly written and perfectly formed and kasha and mahuda, but it's no good because whatever was written after the psul is a problem. Mishum sheyu shaloi kasidron, because you're going to have the problem of shaloi kasidron nuchud el b'reish hasimin, like we said previously. Interestingly, in note 150, take a look there in the Dirshu notes. It says, even strictly speaking, the Sofer himself can be the one to check it and to read it 2 or 3 times before he starts getting ready to put it in the bias. Mikol Malkum Kosav B'Shad Shuvah Shevet Halevi Al Pi Divrei Bnei Yona Sheyesh Lahach Militin LaOdam Acher Yirei Shamayim Mumcha Sheyagias HaParshias. Peer review, I think it's called. You get somebody else to read it, and not himself, because a fresh pair of eyes is a good thing to do. Or I think you could put it through the computer check or something like that. But give it to somebody else. He shouldn't be the only one who's looking at it. He carries on in the next paragraph in the footnote 150. The cost of oid shebizmanenu, in our days, nowadays, chiyuv hahagah chiyuv gomu me'ikadin. The chiyuv to read it over is me'ikadin, mipnei she'ein loy masherev hamatzuyim etzel kasiva mumchim heim. Don't assume that all the people who write it are experts. Ve'ein ches kaskashros ala tefillin, and there is no ches kaskash on tefillin. Va'psulim heim begeder miut hamatzui. Don't say that those who are apostle is a very small minority. The obligation, the onus is on the Sofer to make sure that whatever comes out from his hands is perfectly kosher. Don't rely on the fellow in the shop selling it, and don't rely on the buyer to check the ksav and the tefillin. The onus is on the Sofer himself who writes the parashas. He has got to make sure that it's all written perfectly. Okay, Chaf Beis. Next halacha. Tov lenasos hakulmus kodim sheyaschel. It's good to try out when the kulmus is the quill, so the pen that he's writing with, the quill. It's good to test it out. Kodim sheyaschel lichtov parasha, before you begin writing. Shelo yehei olav diya yosem midai v'yafsid. You shouldn't have too much ink on the end of the quill, and that could cause mafsid. It could mess up the writing. And so too, you got to be careful before he writes the Shem Hashem. Likris kol mashekosav. He should read all the bit before that it's correct. He hasn't made any mistakes. Because if he writes the Shem Hashem, once he's written the Shem Hashem, then there's a chiyuv of gniza, of putting it in the shemus, and therefore he should check before he writes the Shem Hashem that whatever is written previously is okay. But if he found the psul, then at least he can throw that away. That hasn't got the kedushah. But once he's got the shemus, then you've got more serious problems. Chaf Beis, says the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Kufhei, Sif Cotton Kufhei, Kodim sheyaschel. It doesn't necessarily mean at the beginning of each parsha he's got to check. Before he begins writing that session, he should check that whatever is written till now is good. What is written in the beginning of that parsha, and not previously. When he dips the the quill into the ink to write the Shem Hashem, lo yaschil lichtev oisemiyah. Don't go straight in and write the Shem Hashem. Shelo yafsidenu beribud, because the first time when you dip it in, you've got an excess of ink on the edge, on the tip of the quill. Ula yeshlov seyar, or perhaps you've got a little strand of hair. Velo yetzeh ksav meyusher, and therefore the writing won't come out straight. V'gam mishum shetzorich lekadesh hadyei she'ala kulmas terem sheyichtav Hashem. And furthermore, you need to actually be mekadesh. You've got to sanctify that. You've got to say this. I'm writing this l'shem kedushas shefer. Like we said yesterday, that you're doing it l'shem, the kesivus of the azkoros of Hashem. Lochein yechaven lo niach eis achas milichtav. Therefore, a good practice would be to leave over one letter before you write the shem. So you write one letter before the Shem Hashem, so you can run in to write the Shem Hashem in a more correct fashion. But if you didn't do it, you find a previous letter, a tag or a crown to the letter, that needs a bit more ink, and then you sort of thicken it a little bit, and then you write the Shem Hashem. If you need extra ink to finish off the Shem Hashem, you've dipped it into the quill and you've written a Yud and then a Hey and then a Vav and you need a bit more ink, then what should you do? You can take a little bit of the ink from the letters before the Shem Hashem, Shehem Lachim Adayin, that is still wet, and you can just take a little bit of that ink, V'yigmar Hashem. You only need a little drop of ink, because once you dip into the inkwell, yeah, thank you. Then you've got a lot of ink on the quill, and therefore that could that makes it more difficult. But don't dip into the letters of the Shem Hashem itself. Choose an earlier letter. And there are those who make a litbal ba'osis Hashem asman. They allow you to dip into the previous letters of the Shem itself. To bizuleka. There's no bizoyan. There's no disgrace over here. Because I'm doing it to write the Shem Hashem. So therefore it's perfectly acceptable. And if the letters previously are not wet, so you can't draw on there, you can't sort of take some of that ink, so then you dip again into the inkwell, like we said, all of this is the mitzvah, is l'chatchila, and is not ma'akev. Good. Okay, Chav Gimel. Now, the guy checks it, the Sofer checks it, and his worst fears are founded. He finds that he's missed out a letter. Or, he's found he's missing a letter. Ein lo takona. He's got no remedy. Because if he wants to, if the tefillin is written not in order, psulin. Mishum dechsiv v'hoyu, like we said previously, because it says in the parsha v'hoyu, which means b'haviyosan yuhu, the parsha's got to be written in order. V'im yiser oisachas. Now, if, however, he finds an extra letter, then there is what he can do. Yesh takona al yedei sheyigra oisa, he can scrape away that extra letter. Im hi besoif teva b'tchilasa, if it's at the end or the beginning of a word, because that's not a problem. Aval im hi be'emtza teva lo. If he wrote an extra letter in the middle of a word, then he's got more of a problem. Because when he scrapes away that letter, it looks like you've got two words. So then you've got a problem. So if you've got you're missing a letter, you're stuck. If you've got an extra letter, it depends where it is. If the letter's at the beginning or the end, just scrape it away. If it's in the middle, then you've got a problem. Now, let's do the Mishnah Berurah, because the Mishnah Berurah is going to say there are some things that he can do. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sivkot and Kufches, Takona. So we said that if he has missed out a letter, there's nothing he can do. Ein lo takona, b'hashloma, by sort of writing it in, because if he writes in that missing letter, then he's written it shelo kasidra. Umayri shemikan at sofer parsha yesh shemos she'enim nimchakim. There are shemos of Hashem which cannot be erased. Dilav hochi yigrad sofer. If he had found that there was a missing letter, then he could just scrape away the subsequent parts. But if you've got the Shem Hashem there, you can't just scrape away the Shem Hashem. That's a problem of Mechikas Hashem. Kuftes, Bahavi Osen Yehu. They've got to be written in order. Pirush. Kaseda Shenichtovas B'Torah Yiksuvin. They've got to be written in the order they're written in the Torah. Ois Achas. Now, Kuf Yud is going on when he's added a letter. So if by mistake he's added an extra letter, says the Mishnah Berurah, V'im kosav tevi yaser. What if you've written an extra word? Right? We all do this with our typing. Sometimes you write the word twice. So what if the Sofer finds that he's written an extra word? So then, says the Mishnah Berurah, Yigrurena, he just scrapes that away. How about that? You can scrape away the extra words and you leave that little blank space. And what you do is you find the words before that space and you can just sort of stretch it over a little bit. You can imagine you've got the letter hey. So you can just stretch the roof of the hey and you can fill the gap a little bit. So Pirish, sorry, I've just lost it. I'm starting again Kufyud. If you find an extra word, you scrape it away. And you can leave that space blank. And if you haven't got a letter at the end of that, the word before the space, where you can stretch it across, the gap is, it can't be more than 9 letters. If it's too big a gap, then you've got a problem. And sometimes there is a takona. Like I just said, you can stretch the letter beforehand to go across, to reduce the gap to less than 9 letters. And moreover, if you've got a problem that the gap is so big that it's going to puzzle the tefillin, say for example, the last letter before the gap is a hey or a kuf, you can stretch the roof of that previous letter to reduce the gap. Even though, can you picture in your mind, you've got the letter hey, you're stretching the roof of the hay over, but that means the leg of the hay is not underneath the end of the roof. Yeah, don't worry. Yeah, because otherwise you're going to have posel tefillin, because your gap is too big. Better to have the roof of the hay or the kuf stretching over, and then you'll be okay. Because of our prima godim.
That's a zavov.
Yeah, so if you can do it. If the letter is evolved, then that doesn't help you, correct. Or any letter where you can't stretch it. Because of our prima godim, the beteva kfula, if in a situation where you've written 2 words, tov yoyse limcha kashnia. So which word do you erase? The first one or the second one? Right? So he says, better to erase the second one. Why? The teva harishan kedin nichtav. Because you're left with the first word, which was written properly. It's the second letter, it's the second word, which was the problem. If, however, before the first word, there is an ois which you can stretch, better to erase the first word, because according to Rabbi Tam, it's not 9 letters which is the gap, it's 3 letters. So if you erase the second word, and you're going to have a gap of say 6 letters, then you haven't, according to Rabbi Tam, you're tefillin apostle. So better to erase the first word and stretch the letter at the end just before the gap to make the gap less than 3 letters. So according to Rabbi Tam, you're going to be okay. Okay, Kuf Yud Aleph, Sheyigrar, you can actually scrape away. Don't worry, you haven't got a problem of chak toiches, which we said previously. Chak toiches means you've got a blob of ink and you scrape away the letter or the bits around it to form the letter. That's not called ksiva. So we've said previously that doesn't work. So if you scrape away one letter, let's say the end or the first letter of the word or the last letter of the word, don't worry about chak toiches. You haven't done anything in the actual letters themselves. The letters have been written properly. It's just that you scraped away an extra letter. And we said that you can scrape away a word in the middle, so long as it's not near a kashtei tevis. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Kufyud Beis, and sometimes shetikun, this repair, sometimes it can work if you scrape away a letter in the middle of a word, and you just stretch it across to fill the gap. Kagoin, here we go. La avosecha. The word la'avisecha in the Parsha of the Tefillin, shekosav mole bevov achar bayis. By mistake, you put a vov in. Can you see in la'avisecha, you've got a vov. You shouldn't have a vov in it. So you've put a vov in after the base. Yigre'ena. You just scratch it away. V'yimshech habeis, and then stretch the base. Shelefoneh shetamale mekoimo. You can just stretch the roof of the base so it fills any gap. V'chein, so too, if the tikkun involves a kaf or a dalad, a reish, she'ef shel hamshichen ma'at, you can stretch the roof of that letter over a little bit. Lamali mokom osay seira shenigra. Avim osay she'ef shel hamshichen hein acha osay seira. But if the letters that you want to stretch are after the surplus letter, she'ef shel hamshichen lacharehen, you can't stretch them back to fill the gap which is previous to it. Ad she'igrim mehem tchila kogoin sa'ar she'kosav batayra she'kosav mole. Yeah, the word sa'ar, you've written mole. You've put a vov in it, and you want to scrape away the vov. You can't pull back the reish and make the roof of the reish go backwards. That doesn't help you. Or vov acha aleph she'iyef shel imshech hareish lachareh. You can't stretch the head of the reish backwards. Ad she'iger ragla tchila v'nimsa shebitel tzrosa. It's no longer a reish. Or cheshematakna achach nimsa kosev shelo kasidron. Or if you fix it afterwards, you've got the problem of writing shelo kasidron. Ve'ein takona elim ken yochel lemalas mekom alidei she'ya'abek tzas ha'is. The only eitzah there would be to thicken the whole letter. So in your case of the vov, you thicken the whole vov, and then that fills the gap a little bit. Both either side. So you haven't changed the letter, you've just widened it, you've thickened it. As opposed to where you can actually extend the letter if it appears before the gap. Then you can extend it a lot. You sometimes see that in a Sofer. You have a long reish. So now you know why you've had it. The Sofer had messed up and had put an extra letter, he'd scraped it away, and he's just filled the gap by extending the roof of the reish. You sometimes see it in the Sefer Torah. Now you know why. Ach yesh lihistapik. However, there's one case of uncertainty. The first time the word matzis appears, it's choser without a vov, or kosve mal. And if the Sofer writes it by mistake mole with a vov, or and then he rubs out the vov. In moel arichas tzadik, if you want to extend the tzadi, lemata achach. Can you imagine the foot of the tzadi? You make it long, not the top of the reish. You make the foot of the tzadi. You extend that across to fill the gap. Or perhaps that looks like two words. The nun. Imagine the nun, yeah. By mistake, you wrote it mole. Can you extend the letter at the bottom? So long as it looks like two words, then you definitely have a problem that it's possible. Kagoin ponai or arsi kosher. Given the beteva achas nichtevu mikol makom lechatchila inoch and lasses kain lavlia ois ba'ois ki yesh machmirin bezeh. I've got a picture, just by the way, of this. Can you see? I'm going to just do one more halach very quickly. Chavov. It takes 2 seconds. But look at can you see the picture of arsi? Yeah. Can you see the tzadi? He's extended the foot of the tzadi over here, and you've got the yud. So it comes out that the letter yud is actually in the letter. That's what he's talking about just now. That's the Sofer. The yud is like in the word. So that's what he was in the Supuk about. Let's just very quickly do Chavtalad. Says the Mechaber, Mutza Lichtev al Mokum Hagerer. What if you've rubbed it out? This looks a bit smudged. Are you allowed to write on that erased part? So says the Mechaber, you are allowed to write on the scratched out part. You can even write the Shem Hashem, no problem. But don't write whilst it's still wet. But don't rub it out whilst it's still wet. Wait for it to dry properly, and then you can scrape it away, no problem. And there won't be any roshem whatsoever, says the Mishnah Berurah. What is the difference between, here we'll see. When grar is the lotion of scratching it away when the ink has dried. And machak means you're rubbing it away when it's still wet. You take a tissue and you rub out to sort of absorb the wet ink. He's just telling us a good eitzah. Wait for it to dry and then scratch it away because then you won't see anything. If there is a bit of a smudge, then there is even b'diavad a chashash. Even with one letter, with one word, that you shouldn't write the Shem Hashem on that place. Okay, leave it up.